I stood at the threshold of my home, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The text messages I'd seen on Shannon's phone still flashed in my mind. "Meet me at the usual place," Harold Blake had written. My wife's reply was just as damning. "I'll be there." My grip tightened on the doorknob, the metal cool against my sweaty palm. I had to confront her, but first, I needed to understand the full extent of her betrayal. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. The cozy, familiar space now felt like an alien landscape, every corner hiding secrets I was not ready to uncover. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room, where I found Shannon seated on the couch, engrossed in a book. She looked up and smiled, but the sight of her warm, welcoming expression only deepened the ache in my chest. "Hey, Dave," she said, her voice light and casual. "How was your day?" I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil raging inside me. "It was fine," I replied, my voice strained. "How about you?" "Oh, just the usual," she said, closing her book and setting it aside. "I was thinking we could try that new Italian place for dinner. What do you think?" "Sure, that sounds good," I said, my mind racing. I had to keep her talking, to gather more information without arousing suspicion. I sat down beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body, but distant enough to keep my emotions in check. "By the way," I began, keeping my tone casual, "I saw an interesting message on your phone earlier." Shannon's eyes flickered with a hint of alarm, quickly masked by a forced smile. "Oh, which one?" "From Harold," I said, watching her closely. "He mentioned meeting you at the usual place. What's that about?" Her smile faltered, and she looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Oh, that. It's nothing, really. Just work stuff." "Work stuff," I repeated, my voice tinged with skepticism. It didn't sound like work stuff. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Dave, it's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "because from where I stand, it looks pretty damning." Shannon's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Please, just let me explain," she pleaded. "Harold's been difficult. He's been making advances, and I've been trying to handle it without worrying you." "Advances?" I echoed, disbelief lacing my words. "And meeting him in secret is your way of handling it." She shook her head vigorously, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, it's not like that. He's been threatening me, Dave. He said if I didn't meet him, he'd make trouble for both of us." I didn't know what to do. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, anger, fear, and a flicker of doubt. Could she be telling the truth, or was this just another layer of deceit? "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "We could have dealt with this together." "I was scared," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to drag you into this mess. I thought I could handle it." I stood up, needing to put some distance between us. "I need some time to think," I said, turning away from her. "Dave, please," she called after me, but I couldn't face her anymore. I walked out of the house, the cool evening air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. The text messages still burned in my mind, but now they were clouded by Shannon's tearful confession. I needed to know the truth, but more than that, I needed to understand why my world had come crashing down around me. The pub was exactly as Blake had described in his messages, bright, modern, and bustling with the lively hum of conversation and clinking glasses. It was a place that seemed far too cheerful to be the setting for the drama about to unfold. My heart pounded in my chest, echoing the beat of the bass-heavy music playing overhead. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, my eyes immediately scanning the room for Shannon. The pub's interior was a blend of sleek, modern design and cozy, rustic charm. Dark wooden beams contrasted with contemporary light fixtures, casting a warm, inviting glow over the patrons. It would have been a place I'd enjoy, under different circumstances. But tonight, the atmosphere felt heavy with tension, every shadow a potential threat. As I moved further into the room, the sudden scrape of a chair against the tiled floor made me flinch. I turned instinctively, my eyes narrowing in on the source of the noise. There, standing near a table in the corner, was Harold Blake. His face was contorted in a grimace of rage, and his eyes locked onto mine with a predatory intensity. "Blake," I called out, my voice barely audible above the din of the pub. He didn't respond. Instead, he slowly raised his arm, and the metallic glint of the gun in his hand caught the light. The barrel seemed enormous, a gaping maw of darkness pointed directly at me. Panic surged through me, but I was rooted to the spot, my mind racing to process the reality of the situation. "Dave." Shannon's voice cut through the chaos. She appeared from the shadows, her face pale and stricken. "Harold, stop. Please, don't do this." Blake's eyes flickered to her briefly, then back to me. "You should have stayed out of this, Dave," he snarled. "This is between me and your wife." "Put the gun down, Harold," I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "We can talk about this. Whatever you think is happening, we can work it out." Blake let out a bitter laugh. "Talk? There's nothing to talk about. She's mine, and you just couldn't leave it alone." "Harold, you're delusional," Shannon cried, stepping closer to him. "I've never been yours. This has to stop." "Stay back, Shannon," I shouted, my heart racing. "Don't come any closer." She froze, tears streaming down her face. "Dave, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted any of this to happen." Blake's grip on the gun tightened, his finger twitching on the trigger. "It's too late for apologies," he said, his voice cold and final. The flash of the muzzle was the last thing I saw before everything went dark. There was no time to react, no chance to dodge the bullet. The pain exploded in my chest, and I stumbled backward, my vision blurring. The sounds around me, Shannon's scream, the startled gasps of the patrons, the clatter of the gun hitting the floor, faded into a muffled cacophony as I fell. My last conscious thought was of Shannon, her face etched with fear and sorrow, as the world slipped away into blackness. I woke up to the sterile smell of disinfectant and the rhythmic beeping of hospital machines. The sharp antiseptic scent mingled with the faint aroma of freshly laundered sheets. My chest felt like it was on fire, a searing pain that pulsed with every breath. I could hear muffled voices nearby, their tones hushed and urgent. I kept my eyes closed, trying to piece together what had happened. Blake had shot me. That much was clear. But why? And where was Shannon? The fragments of memory swirled in my mind. The pub, the flash of the gun, Shannon's scream. It all seemed surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. As I lay there, I heard the murmur of familiar voices growing clearer. "How is he doing, doctor?" Shannon's voice, strained with worry, cut through the fog. "He's stable," a calm, authoritative voice replied. "The bullet missed his vital organs, but he lost a lot of blood. He's lucky to be alive." The doctor's words offered a cold comfort. I tried to open my eyes, the effort monumental, like lifting a weight far beyond my strength. Finally, my eyelids fluttered open, the harsh fluorescent lights overhead stinging my retinas. "Dave." Shannon's face came into focus, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with concern. "Oh, thank God. You're awake." "Shannon," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. My throat felt raw, each word a struggle. What happened?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but she managed a shaky smile. "You were shot, but you're going to be okay. The doctors say you're going to make a full recovery." I tried to nod, but even that small movement sent a jolt of pain through my body. "Blake," I rasped. "Where is he?" Shannon's expression darkened, and she glanced away, unable to meet my gaze. "He's in custody," she said quietly. "Lev, your friend from the police force, he was there. He stopped Blake before he could hurt anyone else." A wave of relief washed over me, mingled with a deep-seated anger. Why, Shannon? I asked, my voice cracking. Why did he do it? She took a deep breath, her shoulders trembling. He's been blackmailing me, she admitted. Those videos from Vegas, he threatened to send them to everyone we know if I didn't. If I didn't meet him. I don't understand, I said, the confusion evident in my tone. Why didn't you tell me? I was scared, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want to drag you into this mess. Just then, a nurse entered the room, breaking the tension. Mr. Grant, it's good to see you awake, she said with a warm smile. We need to check your vitals. Shannon stepped back, giving the nurse space to work. As the nurse adjusted the machines and checked my pulse, I caught sight of my daughter, Serena, standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. Dad, she said softly, stepping into the room. I'm so glad you're okay. Serena, I managed a weak smile. Come here. She rushed to my side, taking my hand in hers. I was so scared, she admitted, her voice trembling. When I heard what happened, I didn't know if you were going to make it. I'm here now, I said, squeezing her hand weakly. I'm not going anywhere. The nurse finished her checks and left the room, leaving the three of us alone. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken questions and lingering fears. Shannon, I said finally, breaking the quiet. We need to talk. All of us. There's a lot we need to sort out. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I know, she said softly. And we will. But for now, just rest. We'll get through this together. As I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me, I clung to her words. Together. It was a small comfort, but in that moment, it was enough. Serena, my daughter, sat beside me, her face pale with worry. She held my hand tightly, as if letting go would mean losing me all over again. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and the weight of the recent events seemed to press down on her shoulders, making her appear smaller and more fragile than she had ever been. Dad, she began, her voice trembling. There's something you need to know. I nodded slightly, the effort of even that small movement sending a sharp pain through my chest. What is it, Serena? I asked, my voice a strained whisper. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Blake was blackmailing Mom, she said. He had explicit videos of her from that club in Vegas. She didn't know he was recording her, and when she found out, he threatened to send them to everyone we know if she didn't do what he wanted. A wave of nausea washed over me as I absorbed her words. Shannon had mentioned the blackmail, but hearing the details from Serena made it all the more real and horrifying. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, more to myself than to Serena. She was trying to protect you, Serena said softly. She thought she could handle it on her own, but everything spiraled out of control. Before I could respond, the door to my hospital room opened, and two detectives walked in, their expressions somber and professional. The taller of the two, Detective Allen, stepped forward, nodding to Serena in acknowledgement before turning his attention to me. Mr. Grant, he said, his voice steady and calm. We need to ask you a few questions about what happened. It's important that we understand the full story. I nodded, wincing at the pain. I'll do my best, I replied, my voice hoarse. Detective Allen pulled up a chair and sat down beside the bed, while his partner, Detective Ruiz, remained standing, a notepad in hand. Can you tell us what you remember from the night of the shooting? Allen asked. I closed my eyes, trying to recall the chaotic events. I went to the pub to confront Blake. I began. I'd seen messages on Shannon's phone. When I got there, I saw him, with the gun. He was angry, and he shot me. Allen nodded, jotting down notes. Did Blake say anything to you before he fired? He said it was between him and my wife. I replied, my mind struggling to piece together the fragments of memory. He blamed me for getting involved. Detective Ruse stepped forward, her expression serious. "Mr. Grant, did you have any prior interactions with Blake? Anything that might have provoked him?" I shook my head, wincing again at the pain. "No, I barely knew him. He was just there at the pub." Alan exchanged a glance with Ruiz before turning back to me. "Your wife mentioned that Blake had been harassing her. Do you know anything about the explicit videos he was using to blackmail her?" "She told me. After the shooting," I said, my voice breaking. "She didn't want me to know. She was scared." Ruiz nodded, scribbling in her notepad. "We've seen the emails Blake sent to your wife," she said. "It's clear he was unhinged and obsessed. Do you have any idea why he targeted your family?" I shook my head again, the motion making me dizzy. "I don't know," I admitted. "He just fixated on Shannon. She never did anything to encourage him." Alan leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in thought. "We'll need to speak with your wife again," he said. "There are still some gaps we need to fill in. But rest assured, Mr. Grant, Blake is in custody. He won't be hurting your family anymore." As the detectives prepared to leave, Serena squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We're going to get through this, Dad," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Together." I nodded weakly, grateful for her strength. "Thank you, Serena," I whispered. "And thank you, detectives. I just want this nightmare to be over." Alan gave me a sympathetic nod. "We'll do everything we can to make sure justice is served," he said. "Get some rest, Mr. Grant. You've been through a lot." As the door closed behind them, I let out a long, shaky breath. The pain in my chest was a constant reminder of how close I had come to losing everything. But with Serena and Shannon by my side, I knew we had a chance to rebuild our lives, piece by shattered piece. Back home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The house, once a sanctuary of comfort and familiarity, now felt like a battlefield. The walls seemed to absorb and reflect the charged emotions swirling around us. My father-in-law, Jack's harsh words about Shannon's behavior echoed in my mind, their sting amplified by the lingering pain in my chest. Jack had arrived shortly after we got home, his face set in a grim mask of disapproval. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he didn't waste any time. "Dave," he began, his voice stern, "I can't believe what Shannon's gotten herself into. This whole mess, it's unbelievable." I shot him a warning glance. "Jack, now's not the time for accusations." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Not the time." "When is the time, Dave? After this Blake guy almost killed you. You know what people are saying, right? Decent women don't get themselves into situations like this." Shannon, who had been silently standing in the kitchen doorway, stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "Jack, please. I never wanted any of this to happen. Blake, he manipulated me. He blackmailed me." Jack turned to her, his expression hard. "Manipulated? You let yourself get filmed, Shannon. How could you be so reckless?" I stood up, the effort sending a sharp pain through my chest, but I ignored it. "Jack, that's enough. Shannon made a mistake, but she's not to blame for Blake's actions." Jack's face softened, but only slightly. "Dave, I just don't understand how this got so out of hand." Shannon took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "Let me show you," she said quietly. She walked over to the dining table where her laptop sat open, the screen glowing with the incriminating emails. With trembling hands, she scrolled through the messages, pointing out Blake's threats and her desperate attempts to placate him. "Here," she said, her voice breaking. "Look at what he sent me. He threatened to ruin our lives, to send those videos to everyone we know if I didn't do what he wanted." Jack peered at the screen, his brow furrowing as he read the emails. "I had no idea it was this bad," he muttered, a hint of regret creeping into his voice. "It was worse than bad," Shannon replied, wiping her eyes. "I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I tried to handle it on my own because I didn't want to worry Dave. I didn't want to hurt him. I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're all hurting, Shannon, but we're going to get through this together. Right, Jack? Jack sighed heavily, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I'm sorry, Shannon. I shouldn't have been so harsh. It's just, seeing Dave like this, knowing what you went through, it's a lot to process. Shannon nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Jack. I know this is hard for everyone. Serena entered the room, her face etched with concern. Is everything okay? She asked, looking between the three of us. It will be, sweetheart, I said, managing a weak smile. We're just trying to sort things out. She walked over to Shannon, wrapping her arms around her mother. We'll get through this, Mom. Together. The warmth of Serena's embrace seemed to dissolve the lingering tension, if only for a moment. We stood there, a family bound by love and pain, trying to find our way through the darkness. As the evening wore on, we talked more openly, each of us sharing our fears and hopes. Jack apologized again, his initial anger giving way to a deeper understanding of the nightmare Shannon had endured. The more we talked, the clearer it became that Blake's manipulation had left scars on all of us, but it had also revealed the strength of our bonds. In the quiet moments that followed, I found myself holding Shannon's hand, her fingers entwined with mine. Despite the doubts that had gnawed at me, I knew one thing for certain. Our love was resilient. It had to be, if we were going to heal and move forward. Shannon, I said softly, looking into her eyes, we'll get through this. I believe you, and I trust you. We're going to be okay. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time, they were tears of relief. Thank you, Dave. I promise we'll get through this together. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of my family, I believed her. We had faced the storm, and now, we were ready to rebuild, stronger and more united than ever before. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I began to piece together the events leading up to the shooting. The need to understand how everything had spiraled out of control consumed me, driving me to uncover every detail of Blake's twisted schemes. It was a slow and painful process, but I needed answers. I needed to know how my life had been turned upside down, and how Shannon had been ensnared in such a sinister plot. Shannon and her friend Janice had attended a seminar in Las Vegas, a professional development event that had seemed harmless enough. But beneath the surface of this ordinary trip lay the seeds of our current nightmare. I sat down with Shannon in the living room, a notebook in hand, ready to trace every step. Shannon, I said, my voice steady, I need you to walk me through everything that happened in Vegas. From the beginning. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the weight of her memories. It started at the seminar, she began. Janice and I were there for a series of workshops. On the second evening, some colleagues mentioned a private club they were planning to visit. It was supposed to be a place where we could relax, let loose a bit. I scribbled down notes, urging her to continue. Go on. We were hesitant at first, she admitted. But after a few drinks, we decided to check it out. It was a discreet place, members only. They had strict rules about privacy, or so we thought. Shannon paused, her face contorted with regret. We felt safe there. It was liberating, in a way, to be somewhere we could just be ourselves without judgment. But that's when Blake showed up. Did you know Blake was there? I asked, my brow furrowing. No, she replied, shaking her head. We had no idea. He must have followed us or found out where we were going. He didn't approach us, didn't even let us know he was there. He just watched. A shiver ran down my spine at the thought of Blake lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And he filmed you. Yes, Shannon said, her voice barely above a whisper. There were strict no-photo policies, but Blake found a way around them. He recorded us while we were topless. The air grew heavy with the weight of her words. I struggled to maintain my composure, the anger and betrayal bubbling beneath the surface. And then what happened? He emailed me the videos, she continued, her hands trembling. He threatened to send them to everyone we knew unless I met his demands. At first, it was just messages, veiled threats. But then he escalated. He demanded that I meet him, alone, in places where he felt in control. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. She looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "I was ashamed, Dave. I felt like I had let you down, like I had somehow caused all of this. I thought I could handle it, that I could protect you and Serena. But I was wrong." I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "You didn't cause this, Shannon. Blake did. He's the one to blame." Just then, the doorbell rang, breaking the somber moment. It was Janice, her face drawn with concern. "I came as soon as I heard," she said, stepping inside. "Janice," I greeted her, motioning for her to join us. "We were just going over what happened in Vegas. Can you fill in any details we might be missing?" Janice nodded, sitting down beside Shannon. "It was all so surreal," she said. "We never thought something like this could happen. Blake was always lurking, always watching. I remember seeing him at the club, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He was just another face in the crowd." "But he wasn't just another face," I said, my voice tight with anger. "He was planning this, manipulating you both." Janice's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Dave. I should have been more careful. I should have protected Shannon better." "It's not your fault," I reassured her. "Blake is the one who did this. We need to focus on how to move forward, how to make sure he pays for what he's done." As we continued to unravel the past, piece by painful piece, it became clear just how deeply Blake had embedded himself into our lives. His manipulation was calculated, his every move designed to isolate and control. But knowing the extent of his schemes only strengthened my resolve to see justice done. Shannon squeezed my hand, her grip firm despite her tears. "We'll get through this, Dave," she said, her voice steady. "Together." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Yes, we will. And we'll make sure Blake never hurts anyone else again." The road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but we had taken the first step. Together, we would unravel the past, confront our fears, and rebuild our lives from the wreckage Blake had left behind. Physically, I was healing, but the emotional wounds were deeper and more complex. Each day brought its own challenges, but Shannon and I were determined to rebuild what had been shattered. The first step on this road to recovery was therapy, a safe space where we could confront our fears and start the long process of healing. Our therapist, Dr. Elena Harper, was a kind, middle-aged woman with a calming presence. Her office was warm and inviting, filled with soft light and comfortable furniture. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil we felt inside. Shannon and I sat on a plush couch, facing Dr. Harper, who listened intently as we shared our story. "Trust is like a delicate fabric," Dr. Harper said gently, her voice soothing. "Once torn, it takes time and effort to mend. But it is possible, with commitment and honesty." Shannon nodded, her eyes reflecting both hope and sorrow. "I know I've made mistakes," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have told you everything from the start, Dave. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only making things worse." I reached over, taking her hand in mine. "We both made mistakes, Shannon," I replied, my voice firm but kind. "The important thing is that we're here now, willing to work through them together." Dr. Harper smiled encouragingly. "That's a good start. Let's talk about how you can rebuild trust. It's about being open and transparent with each other. Small steps, small gestures, can make a big difference." Over the following weeks, Shannon and I attended regular therapy sessions. We learned to communicate more effectively, to share our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. The sessions were intense, often bringing up painful memories and raw emotions, but they were necessary. Each time we left Dr. Harper's office, I felt a little lighter, a little more hopeful. At home, Serena was a pillar of support. She had always been mature for her age, but the recent events had forced her to grow up even faster. She took on the role of mediator, helping to bridge the gap between Shannon and me. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Serena spoke up, her voice steady and calm. "We're all hurting, but we're also strong," she said. "We can get through this, but we have to be honest with each other." Shannon nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Serena. You've been amazing through all of this." Serena smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I just want us to be a family again." "We will be," I assured her, my voice filled with conviction. "It's going to take time, but we'll get there." We had long conversations about our future, our fears, and our hopes. Sitting in the living room, we talked late into the night, each word a step towards healing. We discussed everything: our plans for the future, the dreams we still held, and the shadows of doubt that sometimes crept in. One night, as the three of us sat on the couch, Shannon took a deep breath and spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "I want to make things right, to be the wife and mother you both deserve." "You already are," Serena said, her voice gentle. "We just need to find our way back to each other." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the strength and resilience of my family. "We will," I said, "one day at a time." As the weeks turned into months, we slowly began to see a way forward. The pain was still there, but it was no longer overwhelming. We found comfort in small routines, cooking dinner together, watching movies, taking walks in the park. These simple moments became the foundation of our new normal. One evening, as we walked hand in hand along the beach, Shannon looked at me, her eyes filled with love and determination. "I'm so grateful for you, Dave," she said, "for not giving up on us." "I'll never give up on us," I replied, squeezing her hand. "We've come too far to turn back now." Serena, walking ahead of us, turned and smiled. "Come on, you two," she called. "The sunset is beautiful tonight." We hurried to catch up with her, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow over the water. As we stood together, watching the horizon, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had faced the storm and emerged stronger, more united than ever before. The road to recovery was long and winding, but we were walking it together, one step at a time. And that, more than anything, gave me hope for the future. Blake's trial was a media sensation. Reporters and cameramen swarmed the courthouse steps, their cameras flashing as we made our way inside. The weight of their scrutiny was overwhelming. But I knew this was a necessary step toward justice. Shannon and I walked hand in hand, our resolve steeled by the support of our family and friends. Serena was with us, her presence a comforting reminder of what we were fighting for. The courtroom was a battleground, filled with tense whispers and the oppressive weight of anticipation. As we took our seats, I glanced over at Blake. He sat at the defendant's table, his expression cold and unrepentant. His lawyer, a slick, silver-tongued man, whispered in his ear, but Blake's gaze was fixed on us, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The trial began with the prosecution's opening statement, a detailed account of Blake's crimes. The prosecutor, a determined woman named Ms. Jenkins, laid out the evidence with precision. She described Blake's manipulation, the blackmail, and the violent culmination of his schemes. Her words painted a vivid picture of a man who had preyed on our fears and vulnerabilities. When it was Shannon's turn to testify, she walked to the witness stand with her head held high. The courtroom fell silent as she took her oath, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Mrs. Grant," Ms. Jenkins began, "can you describe the events that led to the blackmail?" Shannon took a deep breath, her eyes briefly meeting mine before she spoke. "It started during a seminar in Las Vegas," she said. "My friend Janice and I visited a private club. We thought it was a safe place to unwind, but Blake followed us and secretly filmed us. He used those videos to blackmail me, threatening to ruin our lives if I didn't comply with his demands." The prosecutor nodded, her expression encouraging. "And how did Blake's threats escalate?" Shannon's voice trembled slightly, but she pressed on. "He demanded that I meet him in private, that I do things to keep him quiet. When I refused, he threatened to send the videos to my family, to everyone we knew. I felt trapped, scared. I didn't know what to do." Ms. Jenkins leaned forward, her tone sympathetic. "And what happened the night of the shooting?" Shannon closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. "Dave found out about the messages. He went to confront Blake at the pub. Blake was waiting for him. He had a gun. He shot Dave without warning." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, the gravity of Shannon's testimony sinking in. I could see the jury members exchanging glances, their faces a mix of shock and anger. When it was my turn to testify, I recounted the harrowing moments leading up to the shooting. "I went to the pub to confront Blake," I said, my voice steady. "I wanted to understand why he was doing this, to protect my family. But Blake didn't give me a chance. He pointed the gun at me and fired." The defense tried to paint Blake as a troubled man, driven to desperation by his own demons, but their arguments were weak, crumbling under the weight of the evidence against him. The prosecution's case was airtight, and the jury's verdict came swiftly. Blake was found guilty on all charges: blackmail, assault, and attempted murder. The judge's sentencing was firm and just. Blake was sentenced to a long prison term, his smirk finally wiped away as the reality of his fate set in. As the courtroom emptied, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The nightmare was finally over. Shannon and I stood together, holding each other close, our hearts lighter than they had been in months. "Dave," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We did it. We really did it." I nodded, my own eyes brimming with tears. "Yes, we did. And now we can finally move on." Serena joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We're going to be okay. I know it." We left the courthouse, the sunlight bright and warm on our faces. The media buzzed around us, but their questions and cameras felt distant, unimportant. We had faced the storm and emerged stronger, united by the ordeal. The relief was palpable as we walked away, hand in hand, ready to start a new chapter in our lives. The road to recovery had been long and arduous, but we had found our way through it together. And now, with Blake behind bars, we could finally begin to heal and move forward, stronger and more united than ever before. We decided to take a vacation to the island of Cuckoo, a place known for its liberating beaches and relaxed atmosphere. After everything we had been through, it was the perfect escape, a chance to reconnect and leave the past behind. The island's pristine shores and crystal-clear waters promised a respite from our troubles, a new beginning for our family. The moment we arrived, the soothing sounds of waves crashing against the shore and the gentle rustle of palm trees greeted us. The air was warm and fragrant, carrying the scent of tropical flowers. As we stepped off the plane, a sense of peace enveloped us, a stark contrast to the chaos we had left behind. Our villa was nestled on a secluded part of the island, surrounded by lush greenery and a private path leading to the beach. The accommodations were luxurious yet understated, designed to blend seamlessly with the natural beauty of the island. We quickly settled in, eager to explore our new surroundings. On our first evening, we walked down to the beach, the golden sand warm beneath our feet. The sun was beginning its descent, casting a breathtaking array of colors across the sky. Shannon and I walked hand in hand, while Serena skipped ahead, her laughter a melody that filled the air. "Mom, Dad, look," Serena called, pointing towards the horizon. "It's beautiful." We stopped to admire the view, the sun painting the sky with hues of orange, pink, and purple. It was a moment of pure serenity, a reminder of the simple joys that life could offer. Shannon squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "This is exactly what we needed," she said softly. "A chance to breathe, to be together without any shadows hanging over us." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I couldn't agree more. This place is magical. We found a spot near the water's edge and sat down, letting the waves lap gently at our feet. Serena joined us, sitting between Shannon and me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I'm so glad we came here," she said, her voice filled with contentment. "It feels like a new beginning." "It is a new beginning," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. "We've been through so much, but we've come out stronger. Together, we can face anything." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky transformed into a tapestry of stars. We lay back on the sand, gazing up at the night sky, the constellations twinkling above us. It was a moment of perfect peace, a symbol of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The days on Cuckoo passed in a blissful blur of sun, sea, and laughter. We spent our mornings exploring the island, discovering hidden coves and vibrant coral reefs. Afternoons were reserved for lounging on the beach, reading, and soaking up the sun. In the evenings, we dined on fresh seafood at beachside restaurants, the sound of the waves providing a soothing soundtrack to our meals. One afternoon, as we walked along a deserted stretch of beach, Shannon turned to me, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Dave, I've been thinking about the future," she said. I looked at her, curious. "What about it?" "I want to make some changes," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I want to focus more on us, on our family. Life is too short to be caught up in things that don't matter. I want to cherish every moment we have together." I smiled, feeling a surge of love for her. "I think that's a wonderful idea. We've been given a second chance, and I don't want to waste it." Serena, who had been collecting shells nearby, joined us, her arms filled with her treasures. "What are you two talking about?" she asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "We're talking about the future," Shannon said, smiling at her, "about making the most of every moment." Serena nodded, her smile widening. "I like that. I think we should start by watching the sunset together every evening." "That sounds like a perfect plan," I agreed, pulling them both into a hug. A new tradition for our new beginning. As we stood on the beach, the sun setting over the horizon, I realized that we had survived the storm. We had faced unimaginable challenges, but we had come through them stronger and more united. The island of Cuckoo was more than just a vacation spot. It was a symbol of our resilience, our ability to overcome and rebuild. Together, we could face anything. And as the last rays of the sun disappeared, I felt a profound sense of peace and hope. This was our new beginning, a chance to create a future filled with love, joy, and endless possibilities.